The standard Daytona 675 has lived in the shadows of its up-spec 675R brother for the last couple of years. But for 2013, that could all change. In this episode of On Two Wheels, we're going to tell you why. So the 2013 Daytona 675 doesn't look like that much different of a bike than the old model. You got a couple reworked body panels here and there, but actually it's an all-new motorcycle. Triumph's thrown everything but the kitchen sink at it, and they've started at the engine, which is all new. It's got a larger bore, a shorter stroke, and what that shorter stroke's allowed engineers to do is they've been able to raise the rev limiter by 500 RPM. You've got new exhaust valves, new titanium intake valves which are reshaped. You got different valve lift and lighter valve springs. And burnt exhaust gas that are now exiting out of a low mount exhaust system, whereas last year's bike had a high mount exhaust. So there's more to the new exhaust than just better looks. It actually centralizes the bike's mass a bunch, which Triumph engineers have further accomplished by giving this thing an all-new chassis. There's fewer castings, so it's lighter. Out back, you've got a new subframe that's a die-cast aluminum piece, so it's lighter as well. You got a new swing arm that's shorter and lighter. New wheels save about 1 pound at the rear. And up front, you got KYB's new center fix fork, which is about 200 grams lighter and similar in design to a big piston fork, so that uses a bigger internal piston for better damping accuracy. Shock changes kind of match that. You got a lighter spring, kind of compensate for all that weight you've saved out back. And you've also got a new adjustable ABS system, which Triumph says only weighs about 3.3 pounds. So what does all this rambling equate to? Well, we recently rolled the Daytona 675 onto the scale, then strapped it to our Superflow dyno. The bike made 115.4 horsepower, which is almost 4 horsepower stronger than the last Daytona we tested, and only weighed 418 pounds. Those are pretty impressive figures for a middleweight bike. Needless to say, we're pretty excited to get this thing out on the road and see how it all translates. All right, so I'm in the saddle of the Daytona 675. And we brought it up here to one of our favorite canyon roads in Southern California. And right away we can feel some of the updates. You know, you got a new ergonomics package. The seat's about 10 millimeters lower. Clip-on's about 5 millimeters taller. It's definitely more comfortable. The old bike could get a little bit aggressive, put a little bit too much weight on your wrist, but this is kind of a better compromise. I could easily see us putting 100, 200 or 300 miles on this thing a day with just no problems. The thing I really love about this motorcycle is that it's so light. Through any of these transitions, a left, right, right, left, it doesn't matter. It just takes so little effort to get the thing to steer. And you can really appreciate that when you get into a tight section road or even when you take it to the racetrack. So the Daytona slipper clutch definitely deserves mention. It's the first slipper clutch that the Triumph engineers have put on a Daytona sport bike, and it works really well too. You can get aggressive corner entry, grab a couple gears, and the rear just stays extremely settled. Can't really fault the new KYB fork either. This thing works well compared to the outgoing pieces. It's not quite as harsh as the old ones where the other ones kind of skipped across bumps. This one absorbs all the bumps in the road a lot better. Overall, it's a little bit more of a plush ride, but yet it stays extremely composed when you hit a rough section. And I really can't say enough about the 675 engine. I mean, we know this inline triple engine is a good package. It's always been a strong performer, whether you're in the canyons, at the racetrack. And this new one's even better. It's got a little bit of a bump through the mid-range, just around like 7,000 RPM, I believe, which is exactly where you are, if you're floating through the canyons, down the freeway. And you got that little bit of top end push too, which I think we'll be able to take advantage of on the track.
The majority of Daytona 675 owners will probably spend their days in the canyons or bouncing through city traffic. But Triumph engineers built the 675 to carve racetrack apexes. So with that in mind, we headed to a windy Chuckwalla Valley Raceway with the hope of seeing how the 2013 model's updates bolstered on-track performance. You know, there are a few smaller changes for 2013 that we didn't mention elsewhere in this video. The Daytona's got a smaller 15-tooth countershaft sprocket, for example, which should increase acceleration out of the corner. The bike's geometry is even more different. The rake's a full degree steeper, for instance, and trails an impressive 1.9 millimeters shorter. This all sounds like press jargon, I agree, but these are significant numbers that we really wanted to pay attention to at the racetrack. Surprisingly, it wasn't the 675's new engine that we first fell in love with at the racetrack, but actually that KYB suspension. This stuff really is that much better than the outgoing pieces and remains extremely composed at a quick pace, which really impressed us because the last stuff was a little bit too harsh and we just never got comfortable with it. Back to that inline triple engine though, I mean, how could you go wrong? Especially for 2013 where you got this expanded rev range and that higher rev limiter. You got so much RPM to play with when you're coming out of a corner. And that's probably the 675's biggest advantage when you compare it to an inline 4-cylinder motor. There's some smaller advantages too though. You got this really smooth transmission that's really easy to click through gears. And getting into the corners, you've got that new slipper clutch, works so well. And you've got some engine management changes that open the butterflies so you get this real composed feel when you're hard on the brakes getting into a corner. And all this adds up to an extremely capable package on the racetrack.
Alright, so it's been a fun day aboard the 2013 Daytona 675. You know, I ride so many motorcycles that I always get people asking me, what would you buy if you were going to spend your hard-earned money? Or what should I buy if I wanted to get a new bike? And honestly, this is the motorcycle I would recommend. The Daytona 675 was already a good motorcycle, and for 2013, it's even better. I do not want to get out of the saddle, and that says a lot about a motorcycle. I'm going to go ride.
You know, it's rare that a new version of a particular bike can improve upon the original without giving something up in return. But the new Daytona 675 does exactly that. You got a better engine, improved suspension, better ergos, better brakes. Honestly, the new bike is so much better than its predecessor that there's almost no comparison. So hats off to Triumph for taking an already impressive package and making it even better.